She arrived with a lawyer and declared that my home now belonged to her son because he deserved it more. While I held my father's documents in hand, she was already drafting plans for my land. But she had no idea I was ready to fight. What happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Jason Miller had lived on that stretch of desert soil for over 20 years, but his family's history on the land stretched back even further. His father, a Korean War vet turned mechanic, had bought the 12-acre parcel in 1975, back when property lines were just barbed wire and good fences were made of handshake promises. When his father passed, Jason left the fire department early, sold the house in town, and moved permanently into the weathered but proud ranch house. White clapboard, rusted tin roof, and the kind of wraparound porch meant for quiet mornings and long shadows. On the morning it all began, the only thing out of place was the envelope shoved crookedly into the side of his mailbox. No stamp, no postmark. It wasn't folded, just jammed in like it belonged there, a badge of arrogance. Jason pulled it out with one hand, the other still cradling his thermos. He wasn't the type to expect trouble, but the bold heading, "Notice of non-compliance, immediate corrective action required," hit him like a slap. He leaned against the hood of his dusty Chevy and read the entire thing under the high desert sun. The document, signed by Karen Whitmore, president of the West Ridge Homeowners Association, stated that his property was in direct violation of HOA community standards, including but not limited to unapproved livestock, unauthorized outbuildings, and aesthetic nonconformity. The kicker? A demand that he vacate the premises within 30 days to ensure community alignment. Jason blinked, reread it, and laughed, not out of humor but in disbelief. His ranch wasn't even part of the development. The HOA had sprung up in the last decade around the periphery. Shiny stucco homes, identical mailboxes, retirees who wanted ranch life without the smell of horses. His land had always been outside their jurisdiction, or so he thought. 2 hours later, he stood in the HOA office, a converted garage painted beige with a fake potted plant near the door and motivational quotes hanging in gold cursive on the walls. Karen herself was seated behind a desk, too clean to be honest. Her expression didn't change as he entered. If anything, it grew smug, as though she'd been expecting him to break the silence first. "I think there's been a mistake," Jason said, holding up the letter. "No mistake," she said, lacing her fingers together. "Your land is technically within the newly drawn HOA boundary map. We passed an annexation clause in last month's vote." "You don't have authority over me," he replied evenly. "This property's been Miller-owned since before you ever laid eyes on this zip code." Karen gave a tight smile. "It's not about history, Mr. Miller. It's about the future. And frankly," she paused, glancing at a folder on her desk, "your ranch doesn't contribute to the community vision we're building. My son is launching a boutique Western lifestyle brand. He needs land. Your land." Jason stared. "Are you hearing yourself? Brad is a rising entrepreneur. With the right space, he could bring investment, tourism, prestige. You have a few horses and a garden shed that doesn't meet paint code." Jason stepped closer, his voice quiet but edged. "So, this is a land grab?" "It's a correction," Karen replied. "Your kind of property depresses value. You're squatting on potential. Brad could turn it into something special." There was a beat of silence so heavy it felt like it pinned the oxygen to the floor. Jason folded the paper, tucked it into his back pocket, and met her eyes. "You picked the wrong ranch." Then he walked out. That night, he sat on his porch with a legal pad in his lap and his old collie at his feet. The stars were clear. The air smelled like creosote and saddle oil, and Jason, for the first time in years, didn't feel peace. He felt like he was being hunted, and he'd be damned if he didn't fight back. Jason didn't sleep much that night. The wind whistled like it carried secrets across the high desert, and every creak of the porch boards felt like a footstep. By morning, he'd brewed 2 pots of coffee and reread every scrap of documentation his father had left behind. The land survey from 1975, the original deed, a yellowed property tax receipt stamped, "Paid in full, Cochise County." No mention of HOA jurisdiction. No mention of West Ridge anything. But Karen had made her move. Not with fists, but with paper. By day 3, the signs began to appear. Literally. A flimsy wooden stake was hammered just outside his fence line, a laminated rectangle zip-tied to it. West Ridge HOA Beautification Zone, subject to community review. Jason ripped it down and threw it in his truck bed. The next morning, 3 more had taken its place. On day 5, a white SUV with a magnetic HOA enforcement decal rolled slowly past his gate. The driver, a balding man in a tan polo and mirrored sunglasses, snapped photos through the window. Jason raised his phone and filmed him right back. The man peeled off without a word. Then came the violations. First, grass exceeding 4 inches. Jason's pasture was dry brush and wild sage. It wasn't even landscaped. Then, structure exterior inconsistent with community color palette. His barn, painted weather-worn oxblood red, had stood longer than any house in the subdivision. He laughed, but the laughter was starting to feel bitter. When the 3rd citation arrived, unauthorized animal presence, livestock not registered with HOA pet registry, Jason drove straight to City Hall. But there, the lines blurred. The clerk squinted at the parcel number, mumbled something about a zoning review from 2 years ago, and suggested he contact the HOA for clarification. Jason left with a pit in his stomach. Somewhere, some paperwork had changed hands, and somehow, Karen was exploiting it. Back at the ranch, things escalated. That weekend, Jason's water pressure dropped to a trickle. His filtration pump had been tampered with, not broken, just enough to disable it. That same day, Brad arrived. He didn't knock. He just stood across the gravel driveway, arms crossed, aviators on, his father's old truck idling behind him. "You really gonna make this harder than it needs to be, old man?" Brad called out, voice oily smooth. "This place is a dump. My mom's trying to make something real out of it. You should be grateful." Jason stepped down from the porch, every movement slow and deliberate. "Don't mistake quiet for weak, son." Brad grinned. "We'll see what the board thinks." That night, Jason installed cameras, 2 on the barn, 1 overlooking the gate, another tucked under the eaves of the porch. He dusted off a dusty old folder marked Emergency County Contacts, the names of local surveyors, water officials, realtors, and 1 semi-retired attorney who had helped his dad through a boundary dispute 20 years ago. He called the lawyer first, a gravel-voiced man named Curtis Mays, who said, "If it's Karen Whitmore, you're not the first. I've got files. Let me dig." For the first time in days, Jason allowed himself a breath. The next morning, a printed warning was zip-tied to his fence post. Final notice. Eviction process pending, HOA letterhead, official seeming signature, no legal authority. Jason didn't tear it down. He left it there. Because it was time to stop reacting. It was time to build the case, to flip the script, and to remind Karen Whitmore, some battles weren't fought in boardrooms. Some battles were fought in silence, and won with patience, paper, and grit. Curtis Mays arrived on a Tuesday just before noon in a dusty maroon Crown Vic that looked as battered as the man himself. He stepped out in worn jeans, a bolo tie, and a tan blazer that had seen better courtrooms. His first words weren't hello, but, "Show me the paperwork she gave you." Jason handed him a folder over coffee at the kitchen table. Curtis squinted at the HOA's cease and desist letters, the fake eviction warning, and the printed violations. He didn't say anything at first, just shuffled through the pages with a slow, deliberate rhythm. Then he snorted. "They're trying to establish implied jurisdiction. Classic move. Quiet title action prep. Bet you anything they're banking on you panicking and giving up. You didn't sign anything, right?" Jason shook his head. "Never." "Good," Curtis grunted. "Then they've got a hell of a time proving enforcement over land that predates their subdivision by 40 years. Jason leaned in. "So how do we make it stick?" Curtis tapped the table. "We counter-document. Record everything. File a challenge with the county recorder's office to freeze any zoning amendments. And most of all, we make them prove their claim." It began that day. Jason sent a cease and desist of his own, certified mail, to the HOA's listed address. He attached notarized copies of his deed, tax history, and a formal demand for retraction of all prior violations. 2 days later, he filed for a public hearing on the attempted jurisdiction claim. The clerk at the county office raised an eyebrow. "You're fighting the Whitmores?" Jason nodded. "On my land, I don't back down." Back at the ranch, the cameras began catching things. Brad pacing near the edge of the fence, talking on his phone, glancing up at the mounted lens but never stepping over. A group of HOA volunteers, clipboard-wielding women in pastel polos, snapping photos of his barn and mailbox. One of them even reached over the fence to measure the height of his wooden post. Jason didn't confront them. He just kept the footage. Karen, however, had gone silent. Not a single visit, not a single knock. But the HOA newsletter, Jason subscribed online under a dummy account, was suddenly full of oblique language, restoring harmony to legacy zones, reclaiming community assets for a better tomorrow. 1 week later, a manila envelope arrived at Jason's door with no return address. Inside, a notice for a special HOA meeting. Item 3 on the agenda, consideration of acquisition plan for historical parcel number 428C. His parcel. Jason didn't attend. He sent Curtis. The lawyer walked into the HOA clubhouse in pressed denim and snakeskin boots and handed every board member a copy of the state statute outlining HOA boundary limits. Then he placed Jason's 1975 deed on the table like a royal flush. "Your plan isn't just unethical," Curtis said, according to a parent who leaked audio later. "It's actionable." The room went still. That same evening, Jason received an email from a local journalist. The subject line, "Inquiry re-HOA land dispute. Would you be open to commenting?" Curtis grinned when he saw it. Public pressure always makes cowards blink. But Jason didn't feel like a man who'd won anything yet. He felt like a man in a standoff, a man being watched. Because that night, just after midnight, someone shut off the main breaker at his pump house, and when Jason stepped outside with a flashlight in one hand and his .38 in the other, he didn't see anyone, but he did find footprints in the soft dirt leading away from the generator box. Size 11 boots. He didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. Because now he understood. This wasn't about an HOA, it was about power. And someone, somewhere, had decided that his land wasn't his anymore. He would remind them otherwise. One receipt, one recording, one truth at a time. The morning after the pump house sabotage, Jason sat on the porch with a thermos of black coffee and a blank notepad. The generator was humming again. He'd bypassed the vandalized switch and installed a lockbox. But sleep hadn't returned. Something had changed in the air. By noon, he had a plan. Not a counterattack, a public reckoning. First, he called Curtis. "We need to go loud." "You sure?" the lawyer asked. I've been quiet too long. By evening, Jason had posted a 3-minute video online. Shot with his phone, handheld and steady, it showed the original deed to his property, dated 1975, then panned to aerial maps showing the HOA perimeter stopping a full acre before his fence line. He zoomed in on the fake violation notices, then finally showed the cease and desist sign now posted at his front gate. Metal, bolted, not paper. He said one sentence to camera. This land was bought fair. My father built it from clay. No one's son deserves it more than me. He didn't add music, didn't edit in drama, just truth. The video didn't go viral by influencer standards, but it made the local news within 48 hours, then regional. And the comments were ferocious. HOAs drunk with power. You don't evict legacy. You respect it. That man's boots got more claim than their bylaws. Karen's silence broke that weekend. She showed up at the gate in her signature white blazer, oversized sunglasses, and a microphone clipped to her lapel. Mr. Danner, she called through the bars. We need to de-escalate. There's no need for this level of exposure. Jason didn't come down from the porch. He just raised his phone and started recording again. You came to my home, tried to strip my rights with paperwork and polite lies. Now you want quiet? You want peace? Karen's voice cracked. You're making it look worse than it is. This was just a misunderstanding about community alignment. Jason's tone never rose. You filed a claim. You tampered with my utilities. Your board tried to vote my land into yours. Karen stepped back. He ended the recording there. 2 days later, the HOA sent a retraction notice, official, sealed, and snail-mailed. The board acknowledges that parcel number 428C is outside HOA jurisdiction and regrets any miscommunication. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just a retreat. Curtis called it a win. This is their version of begging. But Jason wasn't done. He forwarded the footage to the local land commissioner. Then contacted the real estate fraud division. The boots in his soil, the power sabotage, the leaked recordings, all filed. Not to punish, but to protect. He wasn't just guarding his land anymore. He was putting up a wall no one would try crossing again. By Sunday, the signs had changed. Not his, Karen's. Her house, barely visible beyond the ridge of manicured hedges, now bore a red and white "For Sale" sign. Jason didn't cheer. He didn't grin. He just stood by the fence at dusk, arms crossed, and watched the wind flutter through her lawn. Her son, once rumored to be entitled to his ranch, was never seen again. Curtis drove out that afternoon with a bottle of wild turkey. You know, he said, pouring them each a glass on the tailgate. Some folks think land's just soil, dirt and deeds, but it's more. It remembers who respects it. Jason nodded. And who tries to steal it. They clinked glasses, and while the sun dipped low over the barn roof and the horses settled in the corral, there was nothing left to defend, only something hard-won to keep.